Okay, this is probably gonna be a short video. Sorry, I'm kind of like shirtless, and I was actually about to go to the gym, but I was just talking to my mom, and I thought it was a really interesting topic to make into a video journal. So here we are. Let's make this quick, okay? I don't have much time. Let me just get the lighting improvement. Also, I feel like I'm gaining a little bit of weight recently. Not, I think I literally am. My scale says I am 92 kilos now, 91 maybe. So yeah, I don't know how the physique is looking, but I do feel the extra fat we've gained. Maybe I should cut for summer, but I think while I'm in Singapore, I will probably lose some weight. Anyways, feeling the lighting is just awful. So, anyways, I want to talk a little bit about a concept that I might have discussed in video journals before, but it's so crucial that even if I've said this verbatim, it's always good to have two copies of this thought out there. Okay. There is a concept that when I discovered it became buried into my consciousness. And I literally think about this constantly every day. Okay. It is such a crucial component of my mind. And the concept is called infrahumanization. Now, to make sure, give me a second. To make sure I don't butcher this, I'm going to read to you literally the Wikipedia definition of infrahumanization. Give me a second. Infrahumanization is the tacitly held belief that one's in-group is more human than an out-group which is less human. It can also be subjectively defined as a result of group comparison that links with positive in-group bias when the in-group is seen as fully human in comparison to an out-group that is viewed as lacking humanness. The term was coined by Jacques-Philippe Léon and colleagues in the early 2000s to distinguish what they argue to be an everyday phenomenon from dehumanization, denial of humanness, associated with extreme in-group violence such as genocide. Intergroup violence, such as genocide. According to Leon and colleagues, infrahumanization arises when people view their in-group and out-group as essentially different in essence, and accordingly reserve the human essence for an in-group and deny it to an out-group. Whether subhuman classification means human but inferior or not human at all may be academic, as in practice it corresponds to prejudice regardless. For example, compare the Nazi idea and Untermensch. The belief that the out-group is less human than the in-group is seldom consciously endorsed by individuals and instead is reflected in the way people tacitly think about the out-group. Researchers have typically investigated infrahumanization by looking at the types of emotions people believe in-group and out-group members possess. Some emotions are considered unique to humans, e.g. love, regret, nostalgia, whereas others are viewed as common to both humans and animals. Example, or e.g. joy, anger, sadness. In a series of studies, Leon and colleagues have widely replicated the findings that people attribute uniquely human emotions to the in-group, but not the out-group. According to infrahumanization theory, the denial of uniquely human emotions to the out-group is reflective of the belief that they are less human than the in-group. Recent research has investigated how infrahumanization influences behavior in a series of studies. Jerion Vegas and his colleagues investigated people's reactions to out-group members who attempted to humanize themselves through the use of uniquely human emotions. They found that in-group members reacted negatively to out-group members' attempts to humanize, offering less help in withdrawing faster than when the same uniquely human emotion was expressed by an in-group member, or the out-group member expressed a non-uniquely human emotion. In American context, Cuddy and colleagues have investigated the influence of infrahumanization on intergroup helping behavior, examining helping in the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina. Cuddy et al. Found that people believed outgroup members experienced less negative uniquely human emotions than in-group members. Essentially, you get the concept, okay? The concept of infrahumanization is that we have this in-group and out-group, and the in-group is human and the out-group is non-human. This is different to dehumanization, which is the belief let's not talk about dehumanization. Infrahumanization, I think, is incredibly important to understand human behavior because it is coded into every one of us. It's encoded into all of our biologies. This isn't structured, okay? So please, and sorry, I'm speaking fast because I want to go to the gym, but it's back day. Anyways, I believe the cause of infrahumanization evolutionarily is because for our alleles to reproduce, there's actually a really interesting video that I'm going to recommend to you if you're curious. On Veritas, dude, every time I shake this table, my whole stuff shakes. By the way, I ordered my new camera. Yay, I got the ZV one. I'll make I'll make a video later on this. Um, maybe it's this one. Okay. I highly, 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 highly recommend watching this video. Okay, the most controversial idea in biology, and it's about, well, the thumbnail is a selfish gene. This is basically about genetics. Okay, what are genetics, and you know, what are the impact of genes in evolution? Where did evolution basically come from? Essentially, the goal of evolution, or evolution occurred as a byproduct of genes wanting to reproduce or replicate themselves, keep existing. And that basic fundamental rule led to the emergent birth of life as we know it today. We believe. Essentially, the goal of your genes is to reproduce and to copy over its code. Okay. Uh Broadly speaking, okay, we're not going to dive super into that, but I believe that infrahumanization existed because one of the most effective ways to do so was to prioritize the in-group, uh, your genes, and to carry them over. When we lived in a zero-sum world where we had a scarcity of, at least larger scarcity of resources than we do now, and we didn't have the positive sum world that we lived in, this was a valid evolutionary strategy. However, I believe what we're seeing now, and since possibly the birth of the Industrial Revolution, which one could argue is where the birth of the positive sum game occurred. Essentially, a zero sum game means that, like, if I have 20% of the pie, you have 80% of the pie. Whatever I have is something that you don't have. There's a zero sum, right? It's a fixed pie. But a positive sum game is that the pie can grow. Essentially, back in the day, if you had farmland, I didn't have that farmland that I can grow. I mean, that's still true today. However, today you can sell the food and I can buy it. Let me give you a better example. In a positive sum world, I can justify having taxes or donating part of my money to go into a public fund, the state, who can then invest that into equitable programs such as funding education for underprivileged kids, who then can have the untapped or who can then tap into their untapped potential, potentially becoming cancer researchers who can then discover a cure for cancer. And if I get cancer later, I can get that cancer cured. So does that make sense? Like, I get less money, but or some of the money gets taken away from me. Some of the pie gets taken away from me, but it goes into like a pie multiplying factory, and I get more pie at the end of the day, right? Positive sum game, which is relatively recent in human history, incredibly recent, relatively in human history. I believe that now, due to this birth of the positive sum game, this evolutionary strategy of in-group versus out-group has actually become dangerous, and is limiting actively our positive sum game. So my ought statement here, my prescription here, would be to try to minimize this as much as possible. This concept of infrahumanization is incredibly important because I believe it is our duty to kind of strip it away or minimize it as much as possible. We need to inflate our in-group and minimize our out-group. Sorry, this is all going off the dome. Okay, this is the monitor I'm looking at. I'm literally just looking at myself. Not that if I was reading a script it would be bad or whatever. This is kind of like just to show you that, like, my mind might be a little confuzzled right now. I'm going through a lot of thoughts, and I apologize if I'm going too fast. But anyways, or if I'm being completely incoherent. This concept of let me give you some examples on how this concept of infrahumanization holds us back. If I view my neighbor, which traditionally possibly would be an in-group member, but let's say they're an out-group member, uh, or if my neighbor suddenly in my mental model belongs to that out-group category, I stop seeing them as human. This may be a little visceral or extreme to some people. It's like, I know out-group people, like, for example, fuck. Structure your thoughts. Okay. There's the example I always bring up of infrahumanization and how it is literally in all of our brains genetically is if uh, this is more in Portugal, I believe last year or a couple months ago. There we have these like elevators. They're like trams, but they go like pretty vertically. Not pretty vertically, but they go like uphill, and they're kind of called elevators. And we had one derail and kill a couple of people in Portugal. Rip, sucks, whatever. But that's bad, okay? And in the Portuguese news, it's been covered a lot as a very bad thing, and it was a tragic event, and we had a lot of people discussing investigations, and it was a crazy thing, okay? However, if I were to tell you how many people die in India daily, on average, through train derailment, stuff like that, that number would probably be higher. Yet we never talk about that. Now you can argue that the news can only talk about certain things, so it has to pick and choose what things it talks about, but that's the very point that I'm making. The level of tragedy, specifically for events like this, is larger in other places, but because these places are so foreign to us and those people are so foreign to us, we don't see them as tragic. And truthfully, I believe deep down it's because we see them as less human than us. Now, of course, nobody's going to say, no, their biology is literally not human. But this dehumanization occurs, like we read in that Wikipedia article, through the language they use, right? Like, you can even ask some people this, would you save your pet or like a random person on the street? And most people would probably say their pet, because you humanize that animal more. Humanization, I think for the purpose of this conversation, we're kind of using humanization, personhood interchangeably, where personhood in philosophy means a moral agent, right? An agent possessing moral agency, moral value, whatever. A person is basically a moral agent in philosophy. Some people see as like a conscious person or whatever. It depends how you define personhood. Typically, me, I would. And so if something bad happens, it's like really bad. If I were to show you a rock getting broken into two rocks, you'd be like, okay, bro, cool video, but I don't know what you're trying to tell me. And if I were to tell you like, oh my god, this sucks, poor rock, you'd be like, what? What are you talking about? Because that rock has no person. Good or bad things can't happen to that rock. That rock is a background character in our universe, right? It's not a moral agent. Whereas if something bad happened to an ant, some people could say like, oh, that sucks for that ant, poor ant, because you're personifying it there. But most people will be like, okay, I don't care. Whereas if I showed you a human getting broken in half, you'd be like, why are you showing me this? Or you'd be like, that is horrific, like poor guy. Because you've personified that human, or that is a person in your mind. They are literally a person. Depends who you are, but personally, they are a person to me. Funny language. Anyways, that's what personification, and I think that's kind of what we're talking about when we say humanization. A human is a biological category. It's a biological thing. So dehumanizing doesn't really make sense because it's not like you're seeing them less biologically as a human. I think the more accurate philosophical term here would be personification, but we're not nerds, okay? So we can merge these two together for the sake of this conversation. Personification and humanization are the same thing for this just the sake of this conversation. Traditionally, I wouldn't talk about these as similar terms. Okay. This humanization of animals, there's actually something really interesting that if you look at how someone treats non-human things, animals primarily, but also plants or whatever, you can actually predict how they treat outgroup members. So people that are typically meaner to animals or hate animals or what, not hate animals, but like kick a dog or whatever, insane. But people that are typically less likely to treat animals well uh, are less likely to treat outgroup members well. So, for example, in this case, the outgroup member in the Portugal India example would be the Indian person, right? They're outgroup, they're very far away. I believe there's some literature on what constitutes an in-group and an out-group member, and I believe there's like layers and stuff like that. And we've done studies. I've seen like political comparisons, like what is the liberal or what does the average liberal person's in-group versus out-group look like? Like how many layers removed is the in-group? I think it's like brother or like family, close friend, best friend, neighbor, whatever. There's like a layer and let me find that for you. Okay, never mind. I couldn't find it. Essentially, yeah. I think typically. Oh, wait, there might be data on this. Give me a second. Okay, I stuck balls because I can't find the diagram on this. But essentially, I forgot what I was talking about. Oh, Infrahumanization. Okay, essentially. There's a really cool, I don't know if that's the right word for this, but there's a really interesting example of that man. Okay, give me one more pause. Okay, I found it. This is what I was looking for, or one of the, for this example. There's this guy, Daryl Davis, who essentially, I believe, over the course of 30 years, he spent time interacting with clans members. Of course, this is Daryl. He's black. But spent time interacting with clans members and over time de-radicalize them. The concept of de-radicalization has always been fascinating to me because I believe at certain points in my life, especially when I was younger, politically, I've always been a little bit radicalized. I fell into kind of the alt-right pipeline when I was younger, and then the alt-left pipeline, which is how I got out of the alt-right pipeline. But and now I've been like fully de-radicalized and whatever. But the concept of de-radicalization has always interested me, and I believe one of the core reasons why radicalization happens is because of this whole concept of infrahumanization. The way that I believe, I'm talking out of my ass here, but I believe the way that Daryl, or if I were to guess, the way that Daryl de-radicalized his clans members isn't by talking to them and showing him like the crime statistics and being like, oh, this is actually not true, and look at this logical argument for this, and oh, look at this. It's talking to them and being like, hey, I'm a human too, I have human experiences. I think it's really important for this concept of, even for humanization, but also just for your daily life, to recognize how does humanization happens. Sorry, what? England stopped working. How does humanization occur in the brain? What is yeah? And I believe one of the ways, or one of the core drivers of humanization is empathy, or the core driver of humanization is empathy. And I think the traditional, or one of the common layman ways of looking at empathy is like, I look at someone crying and I think, oh, that guy's going through a sad thing, now I'm sad too. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about like a deeper, more utilitarian approach to empathy, which is just the ability to put yourself in someone else's shoes. So even in that example, when you look at someone crying, you're not like logically you're not thinking like, oh, tears going down face in that specific way, this thing happened to them, oh, they are experiencing sad emotion. Sad emotion is usually attached to these things, and that's not what you're thinking. What you're thinking is like, okay, I've done that before, like I've looked like that before, and this is how I felt when I was like that, so this person is probably feeling this way. All empathy is a form of projection, specifically and only because we can only perceive the world through our brain, okay? You are a conscious, maybe, okay, I'm gonna solve this. I don't even know if you're a conscious being, but probably you're a conscious being operating within this universe and moving around this world through whatever. and you are filtering all this external stimuli that's going into your brain through your brain's architecture, through your consciousness, through your through your ego, through your self. This means that there is no possible way for you to perceive from outside of this ego. Everything gets filtered. Every single thing gets filtered. All external, all of the external world gets filtered through your internal world, at least through your internal models and the structure of your brain. This then causes you to essentially project. So because all of the external goes through the internal, essentially the only thing you really have access to is the internal, or essentially the only thing that is real is the internal. So whenever you look at the external, the way you navigate the external is through using your internal too. Maybe that's the better way to put it. When I'm looking at someone crying, I'm not making this objective claim as if I was a third party god looking at the situation. I'm just picking up on signals that relate to other experiences that I've had in the past. If when I look at someone crying, I'm not thinking tears going down face, crying relates to this thing. I'm just looking at them crying. That external stimuli is getting put into my brain. My inside out characters are going and they're pulling out an orb of me crying or memories of me crying. They're sticking that through my brain into my heart or whatever, and I'm feeling like, oh, this is how I felt when I looked like this or when this thing happened to me. So this is probably the way that person is feeling. You can't experience feelings that you've never felt before. That doesn't make any sense. It's literally impossible. Unless you feel that thing directly, of course. So maybe if you've never experienced what it's like getting shot and someone shot you, you'd pick up on that. But if you saw someone else get shot, you couldn't imagine what getting shot feels like. What you could do is you could piece like, okay, I've experienced pain, and this is probably like pain a lot. This is like a lot of pain concentrated in that zone. This is probably what it feels like. One of the most visceral examples of this for me was when I went shooting for the first time. I was kind of been into guns. I just thought, I love human ingenuity and stuff like that, and I think it's insane. They're holding this metal object. You're making a chemical reaction that results in an explosion, or physical reaction that causes a chemical reaction that results in a massive explosion and a projectile getting flung out of that metal device and hit into something else. I've always thought that was cool and that was crazy. So I've always been into guns. And I've always heard of recoil, and I've played video games. Like, I know what recoil is. I know, like, it's a thing that happens, and it's crazy. And I could imagine what it's like to have, like, something suddenly, like, kick back at you or whatever. But when I first shot my gun, I was completely surprised at what recoil was like. I just thought it was, like, such a simple thing. It's just your gun kickback, but I've never experienced that thing. So when I experienced it for the first time, it felt kind of crazy. Like, you have never sat on this bed, but you have sat on similar things that are comfy. This bed's pretty comfy. It's pretty, whatever. Like 2 toppers there. It's crazy good in bed. But you've probably sat on a bed or laid on a bed before, so you can kind of like imagine what this is like. Another thing that you can do right now with this kind of intuitive, look at anything around you and not close your eyes, you have to look at it, but imagine what it's like licking it. And you can probably picture that pretty well. Like, I'm looking around shit and I'm like, I know what this would be like when I licked it. And then if you lick it, it's probably what you imagine. Because you've licked a lot of things before, so you can construct these things. But again, all of this is constructed. Like, these aren't like, these are experiences that you're projecting into whatever. So empathy is essentially a form of projection. And the only issue is if you can't project if you can't empathize with someone else, which means you can't project your personal experiences onto them, and because you are a selfish being, all beings are selfish beings. Maybe I should probably talk about egoism at a later point. I mean, as part of the meta ethics, that's pretty crucial, but I'll just assume that for now. Okay. I have to skip over this because it's too long, but because you can't project your empathy or your consciousness onto someone else. They don't possess that consciousness, right? If you can't empathize with someone else, they aren't a person, because you're the only person you know. Personhood is like a thing that you feel. Like, I know that I'm conscious. I feel that I'm conscious. I don't feel that you are conscious. Again, you're a camera right now, so you're literally not conscious. But when I talk to other people, I'm not like I can't access your consciousness. The only way I can access your consciousness is by observing the way that you interact with the world, the way that you exist in this world, and then projecting my consciousness onto that because you kind of like act like me. And it seems that like you're conscious, like you're giving conscious vibes. If you can't project that consciousness onto someone else, you can't empathize with them. And if you can't empathize with them, you will act in a way that is not aligned with their flourishing. So if we live in a society, if we live in a society where every single person can't empathize with each other, they can't project their consciousness to each other, and that means they don't act in the best interest of other people, we live in a society of purely selfish, but not selfish in a good, like selfish in a bad way, like self-destructive, or so selfish that you're self-destructive, which doesn't make sense. Human cooperation is critical for human thriving. I'd even say for human survival, but you can have like the occasional goat that's kind of like, even then, one of the first signs of civilization, I believe, that we've had in the history of humanity is the oldest skeleton that we find that has had medical treatment to it. So I think it was a fractured bone that had healed. Because for a bone to fracture, a leg bone, I think it was like the tibia or it's the femoral one, the femur. Silly. I think it was like a fractured femur or tibia or something. And for that to heal, that means that you had external help. If you broke a bone in like primitive, like we're talking like no civilization whatsoever, you're cooked. Okay, you can't get food, you can't get water, you're an easy prey to whatever predator, you're cooked. So for you to heal a bone, that requires other beings or other people in your life or around you to have aided you, and allowed you to heal, protected you, fed you, whatever, for you to heal. Cooperation is critical for human survival and especially for human thriving. We are social creatures in our DNA because that is the way that we've evolved, right? There are certain animals like I believe crocodiles or snakes or whatever that don't have this, that don't have the concept of community and stuff like that. I mean, they get born. I think it's crocodiles. The egg hatches. Mom dips, bro. She does not give a fuck. You're on your own. You will evolve, or you'll handle yourself. And I think snakes are the same. Whereas we have other animals like humans where you need constant care. Right? Like you literally finish developing outside of the womb. We are it's in our nature to be social creatures. So without this, without social cooperation, without empathy and without this ability to project consciousness onto other beings, you are not capable of cooperating. That is why it has evolved in our DNA. Cooperation is empathy and projection of consciousness is critical for survival, and for thriving. So I think that's where this whole concept of infrahumanization comes into play, and where the in-group and out-group has been created. And I believe the out-group, it was either created or not created, but it was either a consequence of, I think you could maybe argue that the out-group was created to make the in-group stronger. So I think this is something you traditionally hear in like storytelling or whatever, but you need a villain to tell a compelling story. Or yeah, basically the out group not revitalizes but unifies the in group, so makes the in group stronger. That is an argument you can make for the existence of the out group. I don't know if that's why the out group exists in our mental models, or that I don't believe that's why we evolved to it. I think a more realistic answer is that it's a byproduct of creating the in group in evolution. I think it's an accidental thing that kind of like worked, so we never got rid of it. But or that wasn't problematic, so we never got rid of it. But I think now it's time to get rid of it. There's so many examples of radicalized. I think the Klan was a good example with Daryl Davis of infrahumanization being so or sorry, the outgroup, this idea that the in-group is human, yeah, infrahumanization is so destructive for human society and human civilization. We would, if there were no, let's say all else equals, all else equal, ceteris paribus, okay? If everything else was the same, but we could have no more starving people. If all starving people were able to become researchers for cancer, let's say all else equal, we double the amount of cancer researchers, we're going to have double the amount of research, kind of, right? If it scales linearly like that, it might even be exponential. But we'd have, or it might be a logger. I don't know. I don't know the scaling of researchers to research, but if we had double the amount of cancer researchers, we'd be closer to not a universal cure for cancer, but we'll have more cancer. We'll have less cancer mortalities. That is almost 100% true. And I believe that applies to almost any field besides like war. If you got like 1,000 soldiers, maybe, we'd have more conflict or whatever. But generally, it seems that the more people we have dedicated to solving something, to solving problems, generally the better it is. You could argue like too many cooks spoils the broth, and that's true. I'm not saying have 50 cancer researchers working in a single lab. What I'm saying is just have more labs, right? Have more minds, decentralized, of course, in a decentralized way, dedicated to solving this issue. I think Infrahumanization gets in the way with that. The fact that we don't see each other as people as much as we see our families or the closest people to us, I believe creates truly lowers our sum, because we live in a positive sum game, positive sum world. Holy crap. Okay, we're 30 minutes into the journal. Okay, so my brain's not working anymore. But because we live in a positive sum game, we are lowering the size, we're reducing the size of the pie because of this concept of infrahumanization. If we could all put our silly tribalist arguments aside and focus on truly acting as one human group, sorry, this is so chaotic, as one human group with one shared goal, we can literally accomplish anything, literally anything. That's why I believe some of the biggest examples of human flourishing, or some of the greatest examples of human invention or whatever, have been in moments of struggle, right? Because we see this struggle as a common enemy that we have to rally behind. Now, again, I don't think we should have an outgroup to make that in-group stronger. I think we could just make that in-group stronger without worrying, by reducing the outgroup, right? The outgroup doesn't have to be immigrants. The outgroup doesn't have to be gay people. The outgroup doesn't have to be liberals. The outgroup doesn't have to be conservatives. The outgroup doesn't have to be all of these, whatever labels you want to assign to this outgroup, okay? The outgroup can just be their common goal doesn't have to be the destruction of an outgroup. It doesn't have to be the minimization of this outgroup, attacking this outgroup, getting rid of conservatives, getting rid of Republicans, getting rid of Democrats, getting rid of liberals. I think the common goal that we can all unite behind is the flourishing of the in-group. And I see no reason why the in-group can't be bigger. Why the in-group can't cover every single human. Why the in-group can't cover every single animal. I'm not vegan, but if you look at liberals, SOCDEMs, usually like looking, social democrats, usually like looking at the Nordic countries as examples of prospering societies, prospering communities, and that we can learn from, such as, oh, look what happens when you have universal healthcare, or look what happens when you have universal education, whatever, free education. When I look at the Nordic countries, I don't see, well, those are, okay, yeah, they're chill things or whatever, but that's not what I see when I look at those Nordic countries. What I see is a high trust society. And in high trust societies where you have high social cohesion, which, keep a stack, it sounds like you're saying a big in-group, a tight, big in-group, social cohesion. We all stick together, right? Because we see each other as like also humans and as common friends, right? In these high trust societies, we see good things generally. When you have a big high trust society with a lot of resources, you see universal healthcare, you see universal education, or like 50% tax rate, because people don't mind paying those taxes because they know that it's going to a fellow human being. But in other countries where we don't know what they're doing with the taxes, or those taxes are, for example, like in the US, are going to like foreigners in Africa or whatever, we're like, oh, those guys aren't human. Why are we giving them money? You know, they're not in my in group, they're in my out group. Yeah, I just think, yeah, social trust, social cohesion is incredibly important. And this is actually a good argument against rampant illegal immigration, for example. I'm incredibly pro immigration. I believe that human diversity is one of its greatest strengths, especially diversity of thought. And I believe that immigration helps also kind of fix our population pyramid. But it is almost certain that when you grab a group of others, when you grab a group of people that are incredibly different to you, culturally, even ethnically or whatever, very different to you, and you stick them in your community, and you create almost these two segregated communities, which we see a lot in the French example of multiculturalism, you will create a lot of friction. When you have these two bubbles that keep rubbing together and don't merge into one bubble, you have a lot of friction, and that friction causes violence. That friction causes, again, lack of social cohesion, which has so many problems. I mean, infinite problems, because it's completely antithetical to the goal of humanity, right? Which I believe is social cohesion due to us being inherently social animals. So again, yeah, friction, not good. And infrahumanization seems to be a great cause, or the in-group and the out-group seems to be a great cause of this friction. All of this came up because I was discussing, yeah, we're looking at those Nordic countries and high trust societies. There are arguments to be made on immigration is complicated. But yeah, what you want is assimilation. What you want, and it doesn't have to be assimilation to one group. It's not like, oh, adopt every single one of my cultural practices. It's like, we can just merge them together, right? Like Chicago deep dish pizza wasn't inherently an American invention. It was Italians moving to America and mixing those cultures together. Now, do I think there are some cultures that have more to offer than others? Certainly, without a doubt. Like, I'm not going to tell you that we need to look at the Indian culture to learn how to deal with cleanliness in our society, right? I mean, India, Bangladesh, and Pakistan are literally the top 3 dirtiest countries on earth, right? I'm never gonna look at you and say like, oh guys, we need to copy their public infrastructure of garbage collection. Okay, that's based, and we need to do that. No, that's stupid. Okay, I'm not gonna say that, but I'm not gonna look at a whole culture and be like, oh my god, every single thing of this, every single part of this culture is like stupid. I'm sure there's I'm sure there's plenty of great things in every single culture, and you don't have to wholeheartedly remove them. And so it's good to be able to pick and choose. And I think this is one of the greatest arguments for this, for diversity being a massive strength, is that all of the greatest empires, probably all, I'm not just not going to say all because I don't know every single great empire that's ever existed throughout history, has been a highly diverse empire. Ottoman, Roman, American, Byzantine, which is kind of Roman. All of these empires were span multiple cultures, multiple different geographies, and were highly diverse. And I believe that is one of the greatest strengths that they have. The Mongol Empire, which I found out like 2 months ago, is like the most diverse empire because they literally allowed people to keep their political systems and stuff like that as long as they, surrender or pay tribute to the Mongol horde. I think if we dropped this in-group versus out-group, and if we realize that, we're all in this game together, uh, I'm talking to you here through a microphone that was designed, HyperX, I don't know, that was designed by a Frenchman or whatever, constructed by a Chinese man or whatever, talking to you in pixels that was designed by another, looking at myself through the pixels that were designed by someone in a computer architecture that was designed by someone, with a light that was designed by someone else. Like, the amount of humans that it took to build what you see right now in this little box is insane. Insane. The amount of people that were involved in this whole process. And I think that is so beautiful. I truly think I think it's, I don't know, I think it's magnificent that people have come across all corners of the world, and united across this huge planet to build what you see in front of you. I think human cooperation is the first great wonder of the world. And it saddens me deeply. It hurts me to see the amount of wasted potential that we see every single day through this in-group versus out-group dynamic, through the concept of infrahumanization. I don't think the solution is to see, truly, I don't think the solution is to see every single person as human. I don't think it's possible, right? It's coded into our DNA. What I do think is possible is to improve the way you treat the out-group. So essentially, if we almost treat the in-group and the out-group the same, the difference between these two groups won't even be that much of a problem, right? Like the fact is the distance between these two bubbles, if it gets closed, it doesn't even matter what the size of your in-group or what the size of your out-group is, because the connection between those are strong, or the way you treat the out-group is great. So I think that's one of the first things. So treat the out-group as if it was the in-group. It doesn't mean start crying when there's a train derailment in India or whatever, but it's, treat animals nicely, treat plants nicely, treat your stuffed animals nicely. There's no reason to spread hate. Spread love as much as you can. So I think that's one of the first solutions, and it's like the bleeding heart liberal solution. But the second solution is a pragmatic and political one. I believe that we live in communities that are far too large. And if we lived in tighter knit, smaller communities, I think at least the in-group dynamics would be improved. But I don't know. This is the concept for another video. Smaller communities versus larger communities. I think one of the big reasons that I think we see so much tribalism today is because you're not a dude I'd speak to on the street. Like, I'm not pulling up and I'm saying, hey, you vote differently than me? Fuck you, right? What I'm doing is I'm pulling out my phone and I'm seeing you as a profile picture and a name, which there's millions of them across my screen every single day. And I'm saying, my phone is saying something stupid, so I hate my phone, right? I kind of felt this when I was talking to my girlfriend yesterday. I was like, I miss you so much, but at the same time, I'm talking to a phone. Yeah, I know that, like, my girlfriend's on the other line and she's speaking, which is causing vibrations in the air that are being translated into electronic signals in the phone, which are getting beamed up to fucking Jupiter or whatever. No, they're probably terrestrial. Actually, I'm using mobile. Yeah, terrestrial cell towers or whatever that are beaming the radio waves somewhere else. I don't know if it uses radio waves, but whatever. They're beaming the stuff across the planet, and then it's coming. There's a electronical signal on my phone. It's getting converted into vibrations, and I'm picking up on it. Yeah, I know that, like, it is her I'm speaking to, but it's not even FaceTime. Like, I'm looking at my phone. Look at my brick phone. I'm like speaking to it. I'm like, okay, like what I'm doing right now, I'm speaking to a camera, right? Like, what am I doing? And I think that has, like, some of the worst arguments that I've had with my girlfriend, or a majority, like I'd say 90% of the arguments I've had with my girlfriend, have been on the phone. And I think it's precisely because of that, because of the dehumanization that occurs when distance like that exists between the two people. Now on FaceTime it would be a different story, but maybe it's just like the lack of visual cues or whatever. It's hard to project consciousness onto just a voice, right? So it's kind of like the Turing test, where it's easier to project the consciousness, even though it's a consciousness that you've interacted with a lot, girlfriend. But yeah, it's more complicated. So I think, on one hand, the globalization of information, of connection, the internet, has been one of the greatest feats in human history, because it's allowed us to come together and create these magnificent and connect like minds together and whatever, experience maybe parts of these cultures and stuff like that through videos, through film. I think it's gorgeous, beautiful. It increases human connection and human prosperity. But I think the reliance on these mediums or the prevalence of these mediums has also created the lack of human connection. It's not even just like, oh, you have less friends on your phone or whatever. It's just the humanization is less. I think it decreases the amount of humanization that you experience, how human these people are. I think if you grabbed a lot of these Instagram comment sections, which I go on very little nowadays because of how cancerous they are, but if you grabbed a lot of these Instagram group chats together and you threw these people, of course, without telling them who each other are, just like, let's say, yeah, without saying like this guy's username or whatever, and you just grab these people together and you had them like spend a day out in the woods or like work on something together, just like have a lunch or whatever, I think these people would get along far more. Of course, you would still have conflict. It's not like conflict began through the age of social media, but yeah, in the modern mediums of information technology have really caused problems for the infrahumanization. Yeah, we've seen record low levels of empathy across people because these people are getting connected. It's not that like I hate my family more because of my phone. It's not that. It's or me spiritually. Or you could be you too. I love my family, but it's not that. It's that I think you're connecting with other humans. Like that internet theory. So maybe a lot of these people are bots, but the people in the Instagram comment section are real people. Like these are real humans, who are being connected with other humans, which is good. But the only problem is the medium in which they're connected fosters tribalism, fosters a lack of empathy, fosters dehumanization, and I think that is critically dangerous. I believe truly the greatest existential risk that we're facing as a humanity isn't AI, isn't pollution of the commons. I don't even think it's environmental issues. I truly think the greatest existential threat facing humanity is the shattered epistemic landscape that we live in, is the shattered reality that we live in, and the idea that we aren't actually living in a shattered reality, that our bubble is the reality. We all have these shattered realities that we're in, and if we realized all of these bubbles are like real, or sorry, we're a bubble, that wouldn't be a problem, right? But it's the fact that we all live in these bubbles and we see these bubbles as the whole world. We're living these like Truman Show universes. We're looking at the sky and we're saying, "Right, that's Jupiter, or Venus, or whatever was the brightest star. That's Venus. Like this is real life. I can see this is the entire universe." And I think that is catastrophic. And I believe if anything ends civilization as we know it will be the shattered reality that we're experiencing, which I believe, yeah, infrahumanization plays a part in. Anyways, this has been a long video journal. I didn't want to rush this too much. I honestly really don't feel like going to the gym right now. I don't even, do I need to wash my hair before I leave the house? Clapped. I feel yucky. I think I'm gonna shower before I leave the crib. Anyways, that's been it for this video journal. Go humanize some people. Go maybe expand your in-group, or go treat your out-group a little bit better. I think third thing, the third prescription that I'm gonna make, and this one's more individual. Try to be conscious of your dehumanization of other people. Again, I'm not trying to see, or your outgrouping, or the lack of humanity you see in the outgroup. I'm not saying that's like an evil thing or whatever. Again, that's our biological nature. But this is something that you can be fully aware of, and you can take steps to remediate. I do this a lot because, again, I'm politically minded or whatever, and I think because I'm aware that of so many issues that I think are facing us. It's easy, intuitive, even intuitive for humans to try to place blame on other people on these issues, or blame onto other people for these issues. But I think something I like to remember is that, we're all product of our environment. And there's so many things that I've done that you can look at and be like, oh, evil or whatever, or bad, or this person's bad for doing them. I think sometimes we're willing to extend courtesy to ourselves that we're not willing to extend to others. Yeah, it's just important to remember that everyone's a person. Everyone has problems that they're dealing with. Everyone has insecurities, biases, or whatever. And ultimately, you'd be a lot happier if you recognize that and you were able to work around that. Humanize each other. I think that's a really important thing to do. Yeah. Anyways, much love. Peace and love. Peace and love. Anyways, I love you so much, and I will see you tomorrow, maybe. I've been working on the game a bit. I should probably do a devlog soon. I'm just working on the temperature stuff. Anyways, I digress. I love you so much. I'm gonna go shower now and go to the gym. Hit some back. See you in a bit. Love you.